So good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see so many here. If you are not speaking, I'm going to ask you to mute. If I hear a lot of background music, I may unmute you from this side. So I'm going to let Vangie explain how this session is going to go. This will be recorded. The link will be sent out so you can hear it back. So if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. Like the speakers can stay unmuted so they won't have any issues.
So you're out in a canoe a little.
Go ahead, Vangie.
Okay, welcome to all the people who are joining us to hear the wonderful speakers today, and welcome to our speakers. Our speakers will be Wendy Williams, Matt Scott, Tom Sloan, and Gloria Krish. The format is that each of them will read for 10 minutes, but before that, they will each give a brief introduction about themselves, a little brief bios. And then at the very end, we'll have each speaker read their story, and then we will have questions and answers after all of the readers give their presentation.
This is just a blessing.
Okay, so hold your questions until the last speaker. And so we'll go right ahead now, and I will ask,
well, California is...
how about Maddie Scott? Would you be willing to be first?
Sure, I'd be happy to be first. I see that Peggy is joining us, which makes me very happy because I'm about to read her favorite poem, and she knows what it is. And what can I say about myself? I'm, I was a lawyer. I was the person who wrote funny poems for the law firm for many years and for the family and everything else. And only one of these is funny. And I keep thinking I should be writing all the time. But I don't get around to it. Wendy's a big inspiration to me in that department. So I will just launch in and I'm reading poetry today. I'm not reading prose. So here comes Peggy's favorite poem for the first poem. The cat, this was a real cat, by the way. The cat who lives at grandma's house has never tasted bird nor mouse. Catching breakfast she thinks would be risky. She prefers a dry but reliable frisky. When she crunches them one by one. There are crumbs all around her when she's done. You'd think a diet so uneventful might make our kitty become resentful. In fact, she spends her nights and days in a sort of a soporific daze. But just when her boredom seems complete, she leaps to her furry little feet and dervish-like works up a froth pursuing the giant dinner moth. The moth on thick wings lumbers by. The cat is up, the cat can fly. Moth is flagging, cat is floating, whacking moth against wainscoting. Moth is tiring, flaps and bounces. Cat, little athlete, spins and pounces. Tail and whiskers bristle. We hear the crunch of fresh moth gristle. For a moment, this drama of wing and tooth seems freighted with primordial truth. Then, having consumed the hapless bug, the cat throws up on grandma's rug.
Wonderful.
So the second one is, the second one's actually a technically perfect sonnet. And I wrote it for the wedding of my niece and her husband. And he's a famous industrial designer and she is a curator for private art collections. And they lead sort of a fabulous life, and they had 3 children together, and then it occurred to them to get married. And so I wrote them this sonnet sort of directed towards their occupations and preoccupations. For Sabrina and Eve, curate your lives with love, for love's display is life's important work. Choosing to marry, you've become teachers. Teach us all to carry each other's burdens. You show us the way. Design your love to last. Produce with care a Maytag of a marriage built for life Each of you must play husband, each be wife, so each in every joy may have full share. Become a work of art, you must be bold. Brushes for all, now let the children paint. Marriage is not for sissies, nor the faint of heart. Worries and ecstasies alike unfold. And when you go to mount this masterpiece you're building, a simple frame is all you'll make. Love takes no gilding. And that's an Alexandrine at the end, as Flossie will recognize. She's nodding. And then most of these others occur to me in the middle of the night, sometimes early in the morning. In the middle of the night, like an old woman, I wake. The moon is shining in my window. I am, in fact, an old woman, grateful for the silver stain on my old carpet. And here's another Boone one. Making my peace with the moon. The fullest moon tugs at the bottom of my being. That tidal pull in the secret chakra floats all boats, especially mine. Oh, excellent moon, if you will not send love sailing into my harbor, then let me be, let me ebb into sleep. Avoid writing I love you in wet cement. Write it in sand, in steam on the mirror, so you can say it again and again and again. A couple more. A couple of very recent ones. Morning air with birds is pouring in. Big, peaceful, slow slabs of morning air with birds are pouring in my open glass door, having been lately breathed by my grandchildren in Japan. I am a corpse full of breath. I am a widow full of love. If you watch too much TV, you say, oh no. If you're on the path, you say, she knows. Another short, recent one. Some part of my constructed self fell away last night as I slept, swept away on the swirling river of sleep to the ocean, the ocean, the ocean. Two more. This is called Sound Banquet. When I am dying, I would like to hear grandchildren or great-grandchildren squabbling in the next room. My children laughing, a tea kettle squeaking and someone taking it off. The garbage truck, the early morning bus, birds, my neighbors' voices in the hall, the dog suddenly barking at nothing. I would like to arrange for someone to play scales on the cello as beautifully as I have imagined I someday would. I would like to lie there and hear my two dead husbands snoring, one at a time, of course. Mozart, Blossom Dearie, and the click of Sally's claws walking across the hardwood floors of cat heaven. Since I am already dying, I will listen to all of these as often as I can and dream of Sally and the husbands and great-grandchildren yet to come. And the last one is called Rebirth. I will come back as a cat because I fall asleep in meditation. I will come back as all the noisy birds at dawn. I will come back as a sugar skull preaching the sweetness of life.
Oh,
That's it.
oh, Maddie,
Love it.
thank you very much. That
Thank
was just
you.
really wonderful.
Thank you for listening.
Before I introduce the next person, I just have to say this, that, you know, I married 3 Irishmen,
Woohoo!
Irish Americans, but not all at once, just one at a time. Okay. So I'd like to introduce next Gloria Krish. Gloria, are you there?
Okay, I have to
Okay.
unmute. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I started writing poetry when I was about 20, and then I let it go for a while, and then I picked it up in about 30 years ago, just as just being part of different groups, and it was always fun to do. So the first poem that I'll be reading, it was written on July 4th, 2020. And in the evening, when it got dark, I went out on the balcony on my second floor and just heard the fireworks, but I didn't see any of the lights or anything. But I stood there for a while, and I just enjoyed just being in this place. But I also had some sadness for the day, so that shows in the poem. July 4th, 2020. Standing on the balcony a long while after the sun has set, a barrage of popping sounds, but no domed burst of multicolors. The fireworks are but sounds in the dark, like a gun battle that surrounds me. A day of non-celebration, a forlorn night, a divided nation, viruses among us on the increase. Moon at the horizon with its reddish tone seems bigger than usual, as though it holds us in its light. From its shining, I gather strength for a tomorrow, transformed, of all, by all, for all. Some of you know that I come from the East Coast, and the next poem was written a couple of years ago when I was on the East Coast. I dedicated this poem to the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, where they had a shooting on October 27, 2018. And you'll see why when I read the poem. The plum tree. Over the back fence in the neighbor's yard, a plum tree angled between the shed and the fence. She told me she had brought the sapling from her parents' farm in Georgia. For years, she watched as it grew. Through my kitchen window, orange yellow in the fall, white flowers before the green leaves returned in April. Never saw any plums. Maybe winters were unforgiving. Climbing ivy from its branches reached into my bushes, or maybe it was the other way around. A year ago, new neighbors took down the white siding and put up black. Early this morning, I heard it, as near as in my own backyard, a chainsaw, limb by limb, not even an hour. Roots ground, heaped like a fresh grave. Through the gap, the sun glares. And this one I wrote in 2013. And all I'll say is Abe is the name of my brother, my older brother. And the title is Just Another Phone Call. I don't remember the last time I called. Your voice strong. Hello. And I, hi, Abe. It was before your trip. What day was that? What time of day? It was just another phone call, one of many yet to come, but it was the last, and I don't remember.
Mm.
And this one was written in 2013, And there was a beautiful park, Ridley Creek State Park. And I used to walk there for whenever I needed a nice walk. And this was written after one of those walks. It's called Shades of Peace. He waited in the shade, beckoning me only 2 feet away, slender, all in gray, the color of the tree trunk, a deceptive blending. In a tone of assertive harmony, he greeted me again and again, long after I had passed him by. Persistent his joy, fearless and focused on something larger, as though he were calling the creek, the air, the sky, and beyond. Awakened to it all, his heart open, standing solid on a lone twig. This one is titled 3 a.m. And I relate to Maddie's waking up in the middle of the night. And I remember the incident, and I remember, I can picture it. I think it was something like 10 years ago or so, 3 a.m.
From the electric.
Waking from a dream, my thoughts stirring, a cauldron of jumbled events. Half asleep, I grapple with hidden messages, pour newly unearthed truths into a journal. Across the fence line, a lone light in your window. What has you up at 3 a.m.? In solitude, in the dark stillness, a comforting common bond.
Okay. Thank you very much, Gloria. And we'll go on to Tom. Okay, Tom Sloan.
Yes. Thank you. I'm all set. I am,
Not a poem.
yeah, I'm not a poet, and I don't have poetry to offer, but we have traveled a great deal in our marriage, and it's one of those trips that I'd like to talk about today. It has to do with, well, I call it the ruins of Copan, but the ruins of Copan included not simply the ancient Mayan ruins, but us as well, us travelers who went down to South America to try to see the ruins of Copan. The essay, episode, report, whatever it is I should call it, appeared in a book entitled, I Should Have Just Stayed Home. The Ruins of Copan. Relax for a while, sleep if you like, Al suggested. We had just boarded his bus. By sunrise, he said, we'll be at San Pedro Sula, partway up the mountain where we'll stop for a break. A pleasant-looking young Honduran who spoke almost accentless English, Al was to be our guide for the day. After his announcement, he sat down near our driver in one of those forward-facing seats designed for tour guides aboard luxury buses. We had been assured many times that this was indeed to be a luxury tour, well worth the money. A large TV set, its screen easily visible by all passengers, hung over the front windshield just above Al's chair. The TV was off. In fact, it was never to come on. The air conditioning was also off. There was no need for either just then, since the passengers were all still drowsy and the air was cool in that early summer pre-dawn of Puerto Cortez. 3 buses were gathered on the dock alongside our cruise ship, the Regency. 2 were full, The third, ours, was almost full, their motors humming in preparation for our departure into the Honduran interior. We were going to visit Copan, site of some of the most famous ruins along the Maya route. Promptly at 3:45 a.m., the buses departed, their interiors darkened. Barbara and I were the only two passengers with our reading lights on. We were still poring over our guidebooks, and we weren't sleepy anyway. Retired teachers and longtime students of European culture, we were experienced travelers, mainly in Europe of the frommer, do-it-yourself type. This was our first trip to Central America, our first cruise, our first luxury trip. Because we had read that certain Mayan ruins were nearly inaccessible, we thought a little splurge might be worth it. Aboard ship, though, we quickly discovered that many of the cruise line's luxury features were a dud. The Vegas-style entertainment was boring, and the midnight banquets, we discovered, were for gluttons only. So we'd fallen into the habit of retiring early. As our bus moved up the mountain, we continued to read while most of the other passengers slept. Of course, at that dreary hour, there was little to be seen outside. Darkness visible was the phrase that popped into my head as I glanced up. The phrase from Milton was to prove curiously prophetic. By the time we reached San Pedro Sula, Barbara and I had read enough. A sparkling clear day had dawned. The other passengers started rousing themselves. After a brief stop at the Copantal Hotel, we resumed our trip, and Al began a narrative of Honduran history. The views from the bus then, ours was the last of the three to depart the Copantal, were lovely. The mountains and the valleys deep green, and misty fog rose slowly from each toward a bright blue sky. Al had earlier said that we would eventually climb to 3,000 feet. I murmured. We climb over twice that high when we drive from the Bay Area to Tahoe. Yeah, but, Barbara said, pointing to a thin red line that on our map reached from San Pedro Sula to Copan, this is not Route 80. Whatever it was better than the route our guidebooks had described, the one most non-splurging visitors take. Overland from Guatemala to Copan. We were traveling in an air-conditioned bus over a paved road, mostly paved. There were large patches of cracked and worn concrete. Several sections were marked off for repair, forcing detours over baseball-sized gravel. As the morning progressed, the bus bumped and hummed along and climbed steadily. With the sun blazing, we surmised that the heat was climbing steadily as well. Just then, the air conditioning began a curiously strained whir. Almost immediately, the whir was joined by some troubling noises from the motor and curious rumblings underneath our feet. Then the motor stopped. Al and the driver conferred in rapid Spanish. Mysteriously, the motor began again, but no sooner had Al resumed his narrative than the noises, the whirring, and the rumblings also resumed, and again, the motor stopped. This time, the conference between Al and the driver was in urgent, if muffled Spanish. "What the hell?" asked a bald man seated near us with his wife. Another nearby passenger, an attractive woman apparently traveling alone, leaned forward to hear what Al and the driver were saying. Across the aisle from us, a sturdily built middle-aged woman with, a sturdily built middle-aged woman with her equally sturdily built husband began grumbling loudly in some foreign tongue that itself grumbled. Most of us were simply perplexed, though a little fear surely began to creep into us as the bus ahead of us slowly swept around a turn. Stalled and abandoned, we were alone in a wilderness that just moments ago was only a lovely deep green background to Al's history lesson. Our bus is losing power, Al said, and help is not available. He said this with that wonderful shrug in which the shoulders come up almost even with the ears and the hands are splayed outward, a gesture that itself can speak volumes. For miles now, our 3 buses had seemed to be the only vehicles on the road. Even the road repair crews were curiously absent. Cell phones, I should add, were several years in the future. This was 1994. It's an hour to Copan, Al said, by bus. We're going to try to make it with the air conditioning off to conserve power. Sorry. The restarted motor didn't exactly hum. It sounded rather like a rudely awakened jungle beast. Decidedly unluxurious, but functioning. Heat gradually filled our space. The bald man and I struggled to open windows, but we discovered that climate-controlled luxury buses are not designed to have any apertures that are easily opened by passengers. Though the heat was defeating us all, that apparently did not affect the motor's power. What little power it has left, I murmured. Al's tactic, though, seemed to be working. We continued our climb with no more stalls, yet just about 20 minutes off, he said, turning around in his seat. His words were less spoken than chattered as the bus began a shuddering climb over another rocky construction zone, this one at a particularly steep incline. Just as Al completed his message and turned forward in his seat, the large television set slipped its mooring and came crashing down, hitting his left arm and landing in the seat. And that's as much of this as I'll read right now, but I will tell you that, as you might suppose, TV set broke Al's arm. And that was just one of many disastrous features of this trip, which I call the ruins of Copan. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm sure you'll be getting a lot of questions after, but we will go on next to Wendy Williams. Wendy, are you there?
Wendy,
I was born. I covered that part.
Oh,
I was born in Concord, over the hills here, and grew up in the Sierra Nevada mountains, oldest of 7 children, and wandered down to UC Berkeley, where I was first an English major and then a law student. I practiced poverty law and women's rights law in the Bay Area for a while, and then taught law for almost a quarter of a century at Georgetown Law School in Washington, D.C. Sorry.
can we
There. It's,
Can we mute that person? Okay,
there's no message. Yeah, okay.
okay.
And after that quarter century in Washington, D.C., I retired and came home to California. I'm working on a co-authored biography of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which is taking forever. But my co-author and I, and my co-author's name is Mary Hartnett, did manage to produce sort of a preview book with the notorious RBG herself, published in 2016, I think late 2016, and titled My Own Words, the own words being those of RBG. But Mary and I did the introductions and conclusions, and I'm gonna devote my 10 minutes to reading some of my own words from the My Own Words book. Excerpts first from the introduction to part 5, which is titled The Justice on Judging and Justice, and then from the book's conclusion. Ruth Ginsburg is not one given to abstract constructs or dramatic flourishes. Her voice, in public and on paper, is modest and measured. Yet her style is distinctive, and her point is often captured in a memorable quotation from someone else or a notable and quotable pithy quip of her own. Her legal analyses dig deep into the real world, its history and quotidian details, and the way institutions, large and small, public and private, interact with each other and with democracy's people. Always, she pays careful attention to the history and purpose, fairness and effectiveness of the rules that shape and direct our justice system. Throughout her speeches and writings, she includes so-called side glances at the justice systems of sister democracies for the light they shine on our own, and offers homage to the way pavers and path markers who have improved our world through law. We begin with Justice Ginsburg's primer on the workways of the Supreme Court, invaluable for understanding what she calls, quote, procedure at my workplace. From how the justices select the cases they review, to the nature and purpose of oral argument before the court, to how the justices reach their decisions and compose and release their written opinions to the public. For anyone from first-year law students to lay people seeking to understand the court, there could be no better guide. Truth be told, Justice Ginsburg has some rather unusual workways herself. Her ability to go without a normal night's sleep is legendary. Her propensity for working until around 4 a.m. and arriving at her chambers in the late morning, earlier when the court's in session, sitting for oral arguments, is known to every clerk and assistant. Her sleeplessness is part of a habit that started in high school and continued in college, where after her roommates went to bed, she crept away to a quiet place to study into the wee hours. But we digress. Another article in this chapter addresses what Justice Ginsburg considers the essential predicate of the work of this court, judicial independence. Her thesis, supported with historical and current examples, quote, essential to the rule of law in any land is an independent judiciary, judges not under the thumb of other branches of government, and therefore equipped to administer the law impartially. Judicial independence, however, can be shattered if the society law exists to serve does not take care to ensure its preservation. Invoking Madison and Hamilton, Ginsburg endorses the concept of a living constitution That is, one whose fundamental principles should be interpreted in light of changing circumstances the founders could not have imagined. She illustrates her vision with a brief history of the American ideal of equality, a concept limited at the nation's founding by a culture that kept early Americans, quote, from fully perceiving or acting upon ideals of human equality and dignity, end of quote, but which, she notes, had, quote, growth potential. The story of the Constitution, she says, is the extension of constitutional rights and protections to once excluded groups, to people who were once held in bondage, to men without property, to Native Americans, and to women. After laying this groundwork, Ginsburg turns to the style and substance of judging. On style, she endorses collegiality between judges and taking the high ground in their courtrooms and in their written opinions. Ginsburg advocates this approach not for manners' sake, although one senses she believes good manners are generally a good thing, but because collegiality leads to better opinions and enhances public respect for and confidence in the judiciary. She includes illustrative, spicy examples of intemperate language from actual opinions, and even names a few names, including Scalia, albeit in footnotes. On substance, she says, measured motions seem to me right in the main for constitutional as well as common law adjudication. Doctrinal limbs too swiftly shaped, experience teaches, may prove unstable, thereby placing stress on the judicial institution. In her view, judges are not Platonic guardians, but play an interdependent part in democracy, participating in, quote, a dialogue with other organizations of government and with the people as well. To Justice Ginsburg, history teaches that the court should avoid either impeding or leaping too far ahead of the political process, instead engaging in a temperate brand of decision-making that proceeds incrementally, ordinarily deciding what is required by the case before it and leaving further development to later ones. Indeed, let's see, where am I here? Oh, comparative side glances, she calls them, at the work of legal institutions beyond our shores have been her own practice as a lawyer, law teacher, judge, and justice, and a recurring feature of her articles and speeches. She wrote, Ginsburg explores how that decision both reflected and advanced international human rights developments. The international response during the World War II era to the rank racism of the Nazis created a dilemma for the United States: how to maintain prestige and moral leadership in the world, given its own policies of, you can see what my life is like here. Given its own policies of racial segregation, including the segregation of African American soldiers fighting and dying in the war against Hitler. The Supreme Court's 1954 Brown decision, reported around the world, she reflects, propelled an evolution yet unfinished toward respect in law and practice for the human dignity of all the world's people, and inspired her own work on behalf of women's rights.
Wendy, do you mind to wait until your answering machine stopped? Because it's hard to hear what you're saying, what you're reading.
I'm sorry. This is my phone rings all the time. It's crazy.
Oh.
Okay. It stopped.
Okay.
Okay.
The Supreme Court's 1954 Brown decision, reported around the world, she reflects, propelled an evolution yet unfinished toward respect in law and in practice for the human dignity of all the world's people, and inspired her own work on behalf of women's rights. In a brief and poignant follow-up, her article Remarks on Loving versus Virginia, delivered a year after the death of Mildred Loving in 2008, describes, quote, one of the most important cases the United States Supreme Court has ever decided, end of quote. In that 1967 case, the court declared Virginia's miscegenation law unconstitutional. Chief Justice Earl Warren spoke for a unanimous court that restricting the freedom to marry solely because of racial classifications violates the central meaning of the Equal Protection Clause. In an article, Remarks on the Value of Diversity, again informed by, quote, comparative side glances, she considers the law and practice of affirmative action, which she characterizes as endeavors to make the equality ideal more than aspirational. Hired as the first woman in a tenured position at Columbia Law School, Justice Ginsburg claims to have been the beneficiary of the Nixon administration's effort to encourage colleges and universities to hire women faculty. Indeed, she labeled 1972 the year of the woman because of the number of women hired that year into all or nearly all male law schools.
Mhm.
There is, she has written, a legal and practical difference between the use of race-conscious criteria to keep the races apart and the use of race-conscious criteria to bring the races together. As she told her audience, it is her belief that, quote, we will all profit from a more diverse, inclusive society, understanding, accommodating, even celebrating our differences, while pulling together for the common good. Okay, and just a little bit more. I'm sorry for the. At 83, that she's now actually 87, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is still going strong. She works out twice a week in the Supreme Court gym. She watches the evening news on TV while on the elliptical glider. Under the guidance of her longtime trainer, she lifts weights and does 20 push-ups with a short stretch in the middle to catch her breath. This is down from 30 push-ups she did a few years ago, but more than most of us do at half her age, if at all. She has twice conquered cancer in 1999 and 2009, and now we have to say she has 4 times conquered cancer, and never missed a day on the bench. On Sunday, June 27th, 2010, she lost her life partner, as she called him, of 56 years and carried on. The day after Martin Ginsburg's death, the last day of the Supreme Court term, she appeared with her fellow justices and announced one of the court's decisions from the bench. Marty, she said, would have wanted it that way. Since the retirement of Justice Stevens in June 2010, she has become the senior justice among the court's 4 liberal members. Significant because when the court splits 5-4 on philosophically divisive issues of great public importance, she now decides who will write the dissenting opinion. Her own voice in dissent has never been stronger or more important to the reasoned dialogue in which the court's majority and dissenters engage as they shape the law of the land. And I'm going to skip over a little. To Ruth Ginsburg's deep satisfaction, the 2 newest justices on the court are women. This is no longer true. Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. Now it's Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. When, more than 2 decades ago, President Bill Clinton announced his choice of Ginsburg for the Supreme Court, she responded that for her, the significance of her nomination was that, quote, it contributes to the end of the days when women, at least half the talent pool in our society, appear in high places only as one-at-a-time performers. When Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, until Ginsburg's confirmation, a one-at-a-time performer, retired in 2006, Ruth Ginsburg was left as the only woman on the court. Neither of us thought this would ever happen again, she said. The word I would use to describe my position on the bench, she told a reporter a year after O'Connor's departure, is lonely. She is lonely no more. Quote, now Kagan is on my left and Sotomayor is on my right. So we look like we're really part of the court and we're here to stay, end of quote. In recent years, when people ask her when she thinks there will be enough women on the court, she answers with a twinkle in her eye, my answer is when there are 9. Does Justice Ginsburg plan to retire? A few years ago, she said she wanted to match the record of Justice Louis Brandeis, who retired after 23 years on the bench. In April 2016, she had matched the Brandeis record. On another occasion, she said she would never leave the court until the Smithsonian Museum of African Art returned the Joseph Albers painting it had borrowed from her to take on tour. That painting has been restored to its place facing the desk in her chambers. When Justice Stevens retired at 90 after 35 years on the court in 2010, making Ruth Ginsburg the court's oldest member and senior liberal, she said he was her new model. The test, she said, has to be, am I equipped to do the job? She will stay, she says, quote, as long as I can do the job full steam, end of quote.
Oh, great. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, Wendy. Oh, thank you very
I'm
much.
so sorry for the background noise. I should have gone to somebody else's apartment to do this, but anyway.
Okay. So
Bye.
we'll open it up now, Elizabeth, right, for questions. Okay.
Yeah, people can unmute themselves, and if you have a question, just unmute yourself, and that should work.
I would like to say something.
Yes, Flossie.
I am impressed with the fact that we are having our poetry, their poetry, and our essayists read their essays, and the people who are working on the big jobs finding time to let us see what's happening. I think this is a wonderful thing. Your next time around, I think there will be works of fiction, right?
Well, we have you on next, on July 31st. We have Flossie, Louis Perry, Ying Lee, and Ruth Campbell. And that's a nice variety right there of different
I congratulate you for the variety.
I try to give you a variety. I try to give a variety.
Thank you.
And we have over 35 writers, over 20 authors. So you're going to get a lot of interesting and fascinating stories.
Good.
And I try to mix it so that you have a little bit of variety each week.
Good, good, good.
Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This is Wilma. I just want to thank all of you who read. And it's just so impressive that we have this kind of talent and variety right here at Piedmont Gardens, and people who are willing to share with us. And since we're not dining together anymore, this is so valuable to get to know each other, and it's just a blessing. Thank you all.
I do thank you too. You said it all for me, Wilma. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, and I'll put in a plug for the bench, which some people here I see are regulars, and we'd love to have more because that's our substitute for our dinner time conversation.
Yes.
Oh, and Maddie, it's always delightful to see you eating your dinner.
Well, it comes, you know, and I want
At the right time. Yes, yes.
Yes. I have a question.
I think it's, I'll just say, I think this is a wonderful way of getting to know what all people have done and are doing, and commonalities. For example, I mean, now I want to talk to Tom about Central America.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes.
Because that's my beat. And I would never have known that without this wonderful forum. So I want to thank you, Vangie.
You're very welcome.
And Elizabeth
And,
for
yeah.
putting this together. It's, we learn about each other.
Yes.
And, that's, in a way, we can learn more about each other than at dinners.
Yeah.
The dinner used to be the main way because dinners are 4 people at a time. And today we have 27.
Yes.
So it's a magnificent way to know who does what, and the incredible variety of things that people do.
Thank you, Suzanne. It really is a wonderful exchange. It's beautiful. I was going to ask Wendy, is Ruth out of the hospital now? Ruth Ginsburg, Wendy?
Wendy's probably on the phone.
Yes, is the answer. She's home. She's been home for a while now, and let's see. I brought something here. That she wrote a statement that the court posted about her current health situation. I of course can't find it when I want it, but I thought you'd enjoy the last few words, but I can't find it, so forget it.
Okay.
It sounds remarkably like what she said in the quote at the end of the My Own Words book. She says she's still going full steam, and she has been able to do all her work in spite of everything and written her opinions. And I'm here to say, as usual, she did she finished her opinions before anybody else and got started on the next round. So her first case that she wrote was the first case announced by the court again. So, but she is every other week going to have to get treatment, and for the foreseeable future. She after her last treatment, she's seen the doctors say there's been some improvement, so that's encouraging. But I think it's also true that there is not an end to this cancer. It is just a delay.
Yeah.
I think that's the reality. And so we all need to get together and sing, "Hang on, Ruthie, hang on."
Yeah.
You know,
We certainly have. She has our prayer for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if she can last, believe me, she will last. She's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's her mission now than ever. It's close.
Yes.
She's going to hang in there.
Hanging in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Say something. How do I say something? Hello, this is
So,
Peggy.
yes. Yes, you have a question?
No, it says Peggy Alter. I just want to say that I have been with you many places without your ever knowing it, and I desperately want to come back to the group. I've been struggling with the Parkinson's, not too badly. I should struggle more, but it's wonderful to hear your voices.
Yes.
Thanks, Peggy.
And Peggy,
And yours.
Peggy, I have you on my list as one of the writers, and so you're going to get a call from me to read one day.
Okay,
Probably in August.
Okay, that's great.
Yes.
Wait a minute. I want to tell our expert on Ginsburg, whose name escapes me at the moment.
The notorious RBG.
Hey, Wendy, Wendy. That I love the poem well, actually, I tell Maddie because I love that poem. I take that poem so often. I pick up that poem. I just think it's great fun. And I have one editing suggestion for the poem: to take out the would be, and there's in about the third line or fourth line. Okay.
Oh, I know. I've thought about that actually. You're right. You're right on the money.
It spoils the rhythm. Anyway, I love the poem, and I take it with me.
It's wonderful.
Blessings to all of you. I'm so glad to just at least see your faces and hear you talk.
You know what I'd like to do now? Did you have anything else to say, Peggy?
No, no.
Oh, all right, I just wanted to let people know that we have Friday, July 31st. I just mentioned that we're going to have Flossie Lewis, Lewis Perry, Ying Lee, and Ruth Campbell. On Friday, August 7th, we'll have Nina Luce, Suzanne Jonas, Nancy Alexander, and Matt Mitchell. So we have a nice combination there, don't we, for those next 2 weeks. And I'm working on August. The next August will be, I'll be talking to people for the next August, mid-August. Okay? So we're
31st.
week. Yeah, we're set for the next 2 weeks. So any more questions? I think I was going to ask Tom just one question about what was the ending of that story?
Yes.
We want So Tom, can you give us the end of that story? It's a wonderful book. I read the book. I should have stayed home instead of on that trip. All the things that could go wrong on a trip. It was quite a book. I guess he took off. He must have taken off. I see that 2 people have left.
No,
So I think
Tom's
he may
still
have
be here, but I think he's still muted. Tom, you need to
Tom.
unmute yourself.
Yes.
There, I think I'm
Unmute.
Oh, there you are, Tom. We want to know the ending of your story.
Yes, the very end of the story is that Barbara and I, when we got off that bus and we arrived at home, we discovered that we had stomach upsets.
Oh,
Which,
Montezuma's revenge.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you see why they should have stayed home.
I probably should have stayed home. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for asking me.
Thank you, Tom. I knew there was quite an ending there. Oh, yes, and that's quite a book too. Yeah,
Yes,
it's really,
it is.
really fun.
Definitely is. Yes.
Yes. So at any rate, I know that Wendy has a book in the library and about Ruth Ginsburg's life. And you also had the movie, right, Wendy? Why don't you just tell us just a little bit about the movie? Wendy, are you there? But Wendy was in the movie for it was called, I guess it was all called RBG.
RBG.
Yeah,
RBG, and there was a movie and there was a biopic, sort of.
Yeah.
And the movie was a lot of fiction, but got her spirit, as she says. But the sort of biographical presentation was actually, I think, a really decent job of sort of presenting who she is and what she's like. And one of the things that surprises people is how what's the word? Restrained, shy she is. She's, like that. And so the movie star who played her didn't get that part at all, really. But her relationship with her daughter that was portrayed in the movie, as opposed to the biopic, was in fact really like it was portrayed. Her daughter sort of inspired her and pushed her a little bit. And she did vice versa, of course. Do your homework, you know. And her daughter is now on the faculty of Columbia Law School. So,
Ooh, wow.
yeah. So she followed in her mother's footsteps quite directly.
Yes, wonderful.
And
That's great.
it should be said that when the movie played across the street, the one that has Wendy in it, Lena Khan stood up in the movie theater and yelled, "There's Wendy!"
That's very funny.
I almost did the same, Wendy. It was so great to
I
see.
probably had my head buried. Yeah. As well I should.
Oh.
Did the
Well-
granddaughter become a lawyer too?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Went to Harvard Law School and finished there. Ruth herself transferred to Columbia to finish.
Yeah.
I won't forget Ruth Bader Ginsburg doing the push-ups.
Yes.
Oh my
Amazing.
God.
My God.
Well, that's
Oh.
one way to get back at the people who are running this country is for her to do her push-ups.
Oh, you know, the one thing she does something that I can't do, and it's really bad. Side planks. You know, she does the plank, which people noticed, and there was actually a demonstration with everybody doing the plank out in front of the court recently. But she does side planks. Do you know what a side plank is?
No.
It's excruciating. You have to plank on your side, you know, feet down there, propped up. It's horrible. And I fall down all the time when I do it. So, but she just does it.
Yeah.
She's been doing it for a long time, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I haven't really realized it before, but she really got serious about it after her first bout with cancer in 2009. She was so thin and emaciated, her husband said, "You've got to go get some exercise and start eating." So she got this wonderful guy, African-American guy, and he was a special forces op, and when he wasn't doing that, he was doing personal training for judges at the Court of Appeals in DC, which is how she heard about him. And he is so proud of her. He's just so proud of her. He brags about her. Do you know what she does? He's a lovely man.
Yeah.
He drives this huge vehicle. What do they call those huge square vehicles?
Hummers.
A Hummer. He drives a Hummer. He drives it down into the basement of the Supreme Court to park. So you always know when he's there because there's this big Hummer. Oh, yeah. It's a strange world.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Well, I'm going to say this was just a wonderful session, and I want to thank all of these beautiful speakers. You did a beautiful job today, all four of you. Thank you, thank you. So, thank you. And we'll see all of you next week, okay? All right.